as real as it gets, The Mint magazine. Climate change, Bangladesh is where it is at. Rohini Kamal shows the way. Debates on climate change are often dominated by heated commentary from the West on its impending peril, calling it the biggest threat humanity has ever faced. But here in Bangladesh, climate change is not a threat, it is an ongoing reality. In our reality, it is a slow compounding of already familiar struggles. The worst impacts from climate change, in the form of heat stress, increased salinity, and erratic rainfall, play out within familiar struggles. They include calls for fair wages and working conditions. Improvements needed in the working environment include a heightened need for water breaks and cooling, especially for those working outside or in enclosed cooking areas. These needs have now intensified in a hotter climate. Elsewhere in the workforce, heat stress, salinity, and rainfall compound farmers' struggles against falling agricultural returns and land impacts from construction and development initiatives. The familiarity of these ongoing struggles exacerbates the risk of a continuance in our usual inadequate response to demands for better working and living conditions. Shrimp and crab farming for export has been hugely profitable and dubbed white gold. In more recent years, saltwater aquaculture has been packaged as a climate change adaptation. But affected coastal populations often cite aquaculture enclosures as being the main cause of increased salinity and have organized protests against them. They have resulted in the murder of protesters by shrimp farm owners. And successful pushbacks against shrimp aquaculture have resulted in reduced salinity and increased agricultural production, increased access to drinking water, reducing the overall vulnerability of the most vulnerable communities. We may all be in the same storm, as the saying goes, but we are not in the same boat. Climate vulnerable women from ultra-poor households. One of the groups most vulnerable to climate change impacts are women from ultra-poor households in southwestern Bangladesh. The vulnerability of these women arises not only from repeated disasters leading to massive health and housing damage costs, but also from limited work and limited social connections faced by women in these communities. Women have few livelihood options, bringing limited access to resources to deploy in response to disasters. Women who do manage to find work in these regions have to deal with harassment and social stigma. Moreover, in these remote areas, the wage for women can be as low as half that of men's. Another gender-related obstacle for women is in the limited ownership of, and access to, cell phones. Disaster warnings in remote areas are often given through cell phones. This has vastly reduced some of the worst impacts of disasters in hard-to-reach areas. However, added to their poor access to cell phones, women are mostly in their homes while men are more likely to be in more connected areas due to their work. This means that women often miss early warnings. Meanwhile, global conversations often focus on solutions using cutting-edge technologies like carbon sequestration or turning to Mars. But they often fail to address the question of access. Those high-tech measures are unlikely to have any relevance to the most vulnerable, and the question of strengthening social safety nets, such as food assistance and disaster relief, or ensuring rights and the ability to organize, get left out. But doers have to be the academics, teachers. We need to acknowledge that technologies do not hold the complete answer. We need to consider also how vulnerable people will access any given technology and the underlying restrictions to that access. In global forums like the Annual Conference of Parties, COPs, wealthy countries who derive their high income levels from carbon-emitting activities hold talks with low-emitting, poor nations like Bangladesh. But the most vulnerable people remain largely ignored in these dialogues. Rohini Kamal.